If you consume more and more information, but you feel more and more confused, today's podcast is going to dive into a little bit more of the nitty gritty around what's actually required to feel confident with your approach to health. If you listen to podcasts, go deep into the understanding of more information and more studies or science behind why we do what we do. A lot of the time, many of us can feel more confused and more conflicted with the information that comes through. I've been in the spot, Mandy's been in the spot where you go down the rabbit holes of certain topics within nutrition, training, general lifestyle, or mindset, and you sort of come back out being like, well, it's kind of questioned everything I've done before, and now I really don't know which way's up. So I want to dive into some of the things that we've learned, beyond a decade each in the health space, really diving into this as professionals and helping other people improve their health. We can, one, say, yes, that's what happens. There's so much information out there, and it's only going to get more and more noisy. But what we've found to be helpful are the tools I want to share with you to improve that process. So, Mandy, the reason this has come up is you're someone who tends to work with our clients deeper into the program. We've got many specialists throughout Body Reset, and you tend to be in a spot where they're groomed in a way by the time they talk to you, or in a position that they've really got some foundations in place, and now we're really looking at those tweaks, refinements to help them win long term. However, you do obviously take some group calls with clients that are in that first month or two, whether mindset or topic based. And sometimes there can be a pretty drastic contrast between the clients in phase one and the clients in month 12, for example. Some of the questions that come through, what are they? And how do you know that's the wrong question to ask?
Questions that often come up are around what's allowed and what's not allowed. Like things like, am I allowed to eat this? Is this good or is this bad? That's sort of these questions around very black and white binary rules of there must be one size that fits everyone that helps everyone to achieve whatever they want to achieve. And I love talking to people in all phases on this journey. Those first questions really kind of give you an understanding of where the person's at and what we need to focus on first. And then deeper into the journey, you see how someone's progressing by the complexity of the questions that they asked, which is really, really cool, right? It moves away from these kind of black and white, am I allowed, can I have, is this good, is this bad rules, to how's this going to impact me? And this is what the answer I always have for anyone asking around these good or bad questions is, what are you trying to achieve? Because without the context of what you are trying to achieve, what goal you are actually working on, there is no way to answer the question of, is it good or bad? Because there is no good or bad. There's just a multitude of questions, a multitude of choices we can make. And it depends entirely on what we want to achieve for that, right?
I really like this angle. And this is kind of one of those things I wish I wrote down before we started, but this idea of even the coaching relationship between someone who's full beginner and someone who's an Olympic athlete, for example, that could be the spectrum to which you look at it, full beginner to Olympic athlete. And I guess to walk down that spectrum, what happens is a level of personal inflection or even just confidence to trust their own judgment. Right. And as you've just said, someone in month one is like, I know nothing. What do I do? And the whole time we're trying to empower that person to be like, well, your body's telling you all these things. You just might have ignored it for a little while. And the more that we can listen to those, the more intuitive we become and the better that this collaborative coaching becomes, right? Because coaching is not, you should do this. It's how does this feel and how do we make this better in many cases? And I think that's, as you said, to the complexity of the question becomes, I'm noticing this, but what do I do with that information becomes a much better question than, am I allowed because I heard on the internet, right? And that's really where that context piece is so powerful, because before we even look at the contextual part that we can dive into, it's more that actual intuition and actually trusting that intuition to make a judgment.
Yeah. It's so bizarre just talking this through right now, right? And I just get this visual of this kind of spectrum of someone transitioning through that process of when you're out of the first beginning and you don't even know what is the question to ask, right? And this isn't just people beginning with health, this is beginning with anything. You don't know what you don't know. And you've got all of these sources of information coming from all different angles and all different belief structures and whatnot that confuse you. And so you ask these questions which aren't even relevant to what you need to achieve. So actually that first part of coaching is helping the person to rebuild that awareness of themselves. What do you feel like when you eat this thing? And we use like a gut reset plan, which kind of makes that easy to take away some of the noise so that you can actually bring those back in strategically and be like, I don't feel so good when I have bread 3 times a day, and I didn't notice that before. So you actually can start asking the right questions, not just am I allowed it or am I not allowed it? Is bread good or is bread bad? And then the deeper you get into that, the more you can be very specific with what you actually apply that to.
Yeah. I think it's a really good angle. And this idea, I guess, that we're coming into that you mentioned, one of those big questions that we get a lot of the time is, can I have this food? Is carbs bad? Or is like the whole good or bad? It becomes very binary. And I think the word spectrum might come up a lot in this call simply because it's like, it's a continuous scale of like, is this helpful? Is this unhelpful? And we've done really, really deep trainings in that space of relationship with food and understanding of, um, how you feel around food. What's your association, right? Like for you and I, it's like, yeah, we love food, but there's a lot of complexity sometimes when food is being associated with guilt or shame or good and bad. There's these massive labels around food, and we've done some really, really great trainings on that. And I think that's really the start of unlocking that intuition of like, well, how do you feel on that food? Like, remove all the things that you've heard on every podcast and BuzzFeed, news article. How do you feel on that food? Oh, I feel really bloated, but it's supposed to be a superfood. I'm like, well, you don't feel good on it. So let's use that information more than the superfood headline, right? And I think that's a really, really nice way to go. We see this a lot in the gluten-free space, for example. If you've followed us for any level of time, we're a fan of looking at periods of reducing a lot of those inflammatory foods, but making something gluten-free does not make something healthy, right? In a lot of cases, it ends up being highly processed, really refined, and double the sugar because we're removing other elements. And I think just being able to bring it back to, oh, I thought this was good, it was gluten-free, right? Shows an inability to listen to some of those other key parts that come through, like whole foods being, pretty primary anchor that you could very much label and associate Body Reset with. We're a big fan of whole foods. The less processed, typically, the better. And being able to look at gluten-free as being something that can be slapped on any label because it's been through another 100 cycles of extracting the nutrients out of it doesn't make it healthier.
I like to look at it through. I actually did training a couple of weeks ago with our clients in the program on this, right? The no good or bad foods discussion, and actually looking at food through the context of what's right for you, what does your body need in order to achieve the goals that you've got, and then how do you feel with it? So it's the information that the food's giving you and the energy the food is giving you, and then the feedback that your body is providing you from the food you've been eating. And I think if you remove good or bad rules, all those sorts of things from all of the food choices that you're making and simply apply it that way, you remove so much confusion. And I can honestly say that I've absolutely been through times in my life where I've been confused and I've read conflicting information and I've gone down 2 different rabbit holes and I'm like, where does this meet? None of it makes sense. But I can honestly say now I do not have an ounce of confusion about what is right for me. The only thing I'm confused about is which goal to chase.
Yeah.
Because there's 2 different methods of getting there, right? But when it comes to the actual choice on a day-to-day basis, I know exactly what my body needs. And I could read something from someone who's hardcore vegan and has science to back it up, and someone who's hardcore carnivore with science to back it up, and I would still not be confused because I know what my body needs in the midst of all of that. And I think if someone can get to that point by paying attention to how their body's responding to what they're doing with it, and also understanding the basic biology of what a human body needs to function well, you automatically remove so much mental fatigue from messing with yourself, trying to understand all of these different belief systems, right?
Yeah, it's a really good way of looking at it because I definitely went through that as well, where one of the phrases I think that's pretty strong in our community now is that space of, oh golly, what was it? No, what was it? We had the half-ass is better than no ass was one of them, and then the second one was this. The guilt of the cookie is worse than the cookie itself, right? And giving you that awareness very much comes from the space of like people have associated so many labels and stresses around a particular food that as soon as they have the cookie, they make it 10 times worse because of the information they so know. But if you have one cookie and it's part of a day or a week that's otherwise, pretty locked in, pretty structured, and you feel fine after cookie, you're good, right? Like just getting to that spot where there's an awareness of where that comes in. And I think being able to allow, as you said, what goal am I chasing right now? Well, if the goal is to get lean or to go through a phase of really assisting a particular organ that I'm trying to clear, then there's going to be certain foods that you're a little bit more strict on, right? Whereas if you're in a place where you realize you're trying to either maintain what you currently have, you're working on strength, performance, you're doing a lot of work where you're tuning through the food you have, said cookie might be fine. And I think just being able to allow that confidence, and I can what was I going to say? I was going to confidently say that I don't have guilt around food, but what I do have is there's still sometimes the moment of like, oh yeah, no, that was a little bit too much because I'm listening to the signals my body gives me, but the actual guilt around like, actually, I feel good on that, and I've had a big workout today or whatever, and I know that my body's using it. It just becomes a very intuitive internal equation of like, okay, if I'm eating all of this food and I'm sitting on the couch, clearly that's not going to feel good because it's not ignoring those signals. So hopefully I'm going around of roots, but I'm really just reinforcing, I guess, to what you've said, Mandy, of the ability to know the goal. And if I'm going through a building phase and I've got a couple of those additional things in there, provided I'm honest to myself of that's a logical reason to add the cookie, not the emotional, I've deserved it, here's 5 more cookies type thing. I think that's where you keep yourself in balance. And I think humans are complex in that way because we can logically know the understanding, but then we can emotionally think something else. And that can go with all sorts of behaviors and purchases as well.
Yeah. I think you raised, like, I was kind of identifying the pre-decision, like I'm confident in the decision and
Yes.
before I make it. And then what you're saying, which I think is the perfect next step, is you're confident in once you've made the decision, there's no guilt around it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, sometimes, and I do myself, like when you go too far with it, you're like, yeah, I knew better than that. I shouldn't have done that. And it's
Yep.
not guilt, it's like, come on, sort yourself out, Mandy.
Yep.
But you're very aware with your body signals on that thing. And I think that in a way, what I don't like the concept of good, bad rules, should, shouldn't, all these sorts of things. But I do think that if you're just starting into this and you're going down that journey, you have to apply yourself a little bit more strictly than you might want to initially in order to reestablish that connection with what does feel best. And are you letting yourself off the hook in a lot of ways? Because I think there's this kind of concept of self-compassion of, oh, well, I ate those because I'd had a bad day or whatever, and it's okay because I'm back on track now. But if you're doing that several times a day or every other day and it's really sabotaging your process, then maybe you need to hold yourself a little bit more accountable. So it's kind of like, I think holding yourself a little bit to something a little bit stricter to start with in order to reestablish those real connections with what is your body saying to you, how are you feeling, and all of that sort of stuff can be a good place to start. And then you can kind of allow yourself out and out from there, right?
Yeah. Well, this is why I love this sort of style of podcast as well, because you and I can kind of go back and forth and we kind of chew the fat as we go. Because I would have gone down a different route here, and I'll get to it in a second. But I absolutely agree because that a lot of the time there's that space of stress around a decision coming through. And I think being able to, what was your initial statement before? What did you just say before?
That you might need to be stricter at the start than what you might necessarily want to be.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, so with our coaches last week, we were talking about most people think they've done 100% on a workout, right? And then we explore what 100% actually looks like, and we realize that was 50%, right? Mm-hmm. So when we say more strict to start with, it's probably because your current version of 100% is not accurate. Yeah. And being able to go through that space of just being able to be a little bit more strict up front is actually, in a way, what's the best selection of word here? Improved resilience, improved capability, capacity, where you're just actually increasing your, you're taking your engine from the little scooter up to a V8, so you actually have the capacity to go fast. If you're absolutely ringing it on that scooter and you're going flat out, but you still have a scooter engine, you're not going very quickly. So being able to use that initial phase, ironically, it kind of goes against what we initially said around like trusting intuition, because your intuition at this point would say, no, that's 100%, you can stop now. And we're like, you're at like 20%, keep going, right? So it's an interesting kind of balance between concepts. But I think, again, this is why we're exploring the context, not just Ollie said we should do 100%, or Ollie said I should listen to intuition, therefore my legs hurt and I should stop. I'm like, girl, you've just started. Like, let's build this up. So I think there's a balance. And that's why I wanted to go that direction, is I think push and really allow yourself to explore what I'd use the word extremes initially, but you'll start to realize is just like challenging the body, a couple months or a couple years down. Mm-hmm. The other side I was going to go, and this is why it's such a sort of complex balance between the two, because we could be talking to two different clients. When we say, someone needs to rest. The client who listens to that will be the one who's not doing any exercise. I'm like, you don't need to rest, you need to move, right? We're talking to the client who's training 5 days a week for 2 hours. I'm like, you need to do less, right, to get more results. So it really comes from your ability to understand, again, context and your background of what's that next choice that you need to make. If you know that you need a bit of a kick up the pants to get moving, find a way to add that structure today and ultimately find a driver as to why is that worth changing your current reality. If you're happy to, you know, sit on the couch and feel sluggish, then by all means stay there. But if you want to improve it, there's probably a little bit of a drive required to really build that routine back in. The reason I was going to go the other direction here around generally the stress piece, but also the overall the challenge of food is that almost relaxed nature of so many of our clients have that binary nature to foods that as soon as they have said cookie, they're like, I've ruined it. I'm like, you had a damn cookie. It's like 100 calories in the course of your whole week, right? So some of the trainings we've done here have been, look, you need to burn 7,700 calories in order to burn 1 kilo of body fat. Now, the reason we bring that up is to say that cookie didn't ruin it. The
Yeah.
whole week is a series of decisions that therefore either ruined it or helped you stay on track. And that allows us to explore this permission to experiment sort of space, right? Because you have some wiggle room. If one or two of those decisions didn't go well, you can back it up with, okay, be a bit more strict with your next meal. You're back on your chicken salad for this lunch, right? Being
Yeah.
able to kind of have that structure does allow you to rock and roll there a bit. Where, certainly a lot of our more what's the word, entertainment based clients, or out for dinner or etc. I'm like, cool, you need to be way more strict on your lunch because you have a little bit more fluid dinner 3 days a week or whatever it might be. So you're kind of balancing things out a little bit, right? Whereas the client who's like, well, every meal needs to be magical and made from this new Jamie Oliver recipe that has, I don't know how many extra calories added from the sauce that you added on top. That's where we need to be a little bit more locked in and strict, right? So that word like go harder or rest is very dependent on the context of who you are as the individual listening to it. Do you know that you're a bit gung ho and you need to simplify? Or you're the person that's always trying to simplify and need to go a little bit more fancy or a little bit more structured to really build some progress?
Mhm. I think it comes back to this whole what I like because we say you've said this before, you don't really know what 100% is until you go past the point, right?
Mhm.
And I think with food, the same concept is you can't really eat intuitively until you understand how food and until you understand your food. And
Mhm.
so if you bring some structure to your week, to your days, and this is how you eat, you then understand how your body responds. So then you can actually be intuitive and make those choices a little bit more carefully and have that even flow of, okay, there's the cookie came in, so I'm back on chicken salad the next meal, right? You're not off, you haven't actually ruined anything. You've had a little bit of a fluctuation. And where was I going with that? I had another point there. And the second part to that is, so you might need to start being a little bit more strict so that you can understand what intuitive is, but also within that, there's no guilt or judgment when you do have a slip up. There's just curiosity of, cool, how did it make you feel? You had the cookie. How'd you feel?
That's what
You,
that's in many ways why we've got the 4 months as an initial program, right? Is like
yeah.
you need to give me 4 months to focus, right? And this was one of the points you brought up and I wrote down before we started is give time to install it and focus. If you're like, well, what about this? What about this? I'm like, you haven't given yourself a week to focus on the first thing, right? Forget about it.
Mm.
And that can feel dismissive when someone like, I don't know about you, Mandy, but actually I do know this with you, but you're always curious to know, well, what about that? And what about this? Right. So when you get on a call with a client, you want to be open minded to the discussions they're bringing to the table, but you also know that none of it is relevant until they give the first thing time. Right.
Mm.
So I'm very aware or trying to be aware of the space around, like, I do not want to be dismissive of the thing you want to bring in, but you're on Wednesday and we talked about it Monday. Like, give me 3 weeks
Yeah.
to actually install that thing. And I think that's the shiny red button, syndrome that all of us need to be able to quieten at some point because there's always the grass is greener on the other side. As we start to dive deeper into a topic, we go, oh, well, what about that or this? It looks like it's easier than what I'm currently doing. And that's in any area of our life. I know you'll feel that as well. So that ability to, yeah, and let's give a really, drastic example of this. I don't know about you, Mandy, but every time I see a bloke in his 60s, 70s in great shape at the gym. there's probably more than a few things that I could highlight in his form or his routine that could be improved with his workout. But the thing that's kept him in shape is that he's ignored all the noise and he's still working out, right?
Mm.
And we've worked with many guys as well. It's like, cool, if you just made this change, your elbow won't hurt every time. So don't ignore everything. There's always something that you can take into on board. But there's a level of just reducing the noise and fluff that comes up, and you've just got to show up every day, because nobody goes to the gym, does this big 2 hour workout and goes, look, I just went from 20 kilos overweight to six pack abs. You do one workout and then you do that workout for 20 years and then you're in great shape, right? Or it could be 6 months, but you get the concept. And I think just being able to allow again that ebb and flow for the person that's already super consistent but not getting results, they need to step back and be like, cool, I'm clearly doing something wrong and I'm running the wrong way, even though I'm working really hard. How can I improve my form, my progression structure, my fueling around the workouts to get twice as much results out of the effort I'm already putting in? Or the other person saying, hey, I'm still wondering what pre-workout I need to take and I haven't been to the gym in 10 years. Get your
Yeah.
ass in the gym, right? So that's where you kind of get the balance of the two. I'm getting spirited. You carry on.
No, I'm vibing with this. I think I get this a lot with nutrition questions, and then I love it if someone's curious. I love it if someone asks a question, but it's not necessarily the right question. Like, and my example here is when people ask, should they be eating organic food, but they're just eating crap. So at the moment, I'm eating crap. If I'm going to get healthy, do I need to eat organic food? Like, you know what? Organic is like top tier. Absolutely, there's some benefits there. But until you move from crap to just eating enough protein and vegetables, it's the least of your worries.
Yep.
Like, take the first step, build the first foundation, and then you can add on after that. And I think this is getting to the crux of what we first started talking about, is these rules and around food. People and confusion. People are confused because there's so many top tier opinions.
Yeah, I was just going to add in there. Yeah, it's like the good and bad nearly highlights or translates to how they eat. They go from fully crap to fully good, and they never just do in the middle. I'm like, if you go from pizzas and pies to the most perfect organic, and then you keep switching between the two, you would have been fine just going to Pack and Save and buying the crappy chicken, but doing it more consistently.
Yeah, just start with the first step. Don't try and jump the whole ladder. And it doesn't mean, and I know that actually riles people up. There's people that I do piss off in the nutrition space because I don't push organic stuff. And the point of it is that I don't have anything against organic stuff, but start at the start. Start where you're actually at, rather than trying to skip steps. And then you can't maintain it, right? Do the first thing, maintain that for a bit, and then if you need to go to the next layer or the next layer or the next layer, you can. And I'm building at the moment a training for our clients this afternoon around fat loss, and exactly the same. There is no point going into an intentional calorie deficit fat loss phase until you've got a foundation of, are you just eating well and moving well, right? Because it doesn't work.
Yeah. So look, I'm glad you got as spirited as me today. There's a really good topic here, and I think if you're listening to podcasts, YouTube clips like this, we're probably talking to the right person, right? Because you enjoy education, you're like us in regards to you value education, but there's also the dark side to it, which is that you get so focused on the perfection of that process that you need to do 10 things before 9 a.m. You need to do a cold shower and look at the sun and X, Y, and Z. Otherwise, your whole world falls apart. But if you just kind of ate some protein before 10, you would have been better than what you did before, right? And it's just being able to select what are the things that you can do on a consistent basis that really feel good for your body. You trust that intuition. And if you're not getting results, one of two things needs to happen. You either need to explore other ways to improve what you're currently doing to make it easier, or two, you realize that your 100% was really 20% and you kind of needed a little kick up the pants to go harder, right? It's kind of one of those two. Do better or do more. If both of those aren't working, then you're looking at the wrong thing in the first instance. And I think just being able to give yourself that filter of, if there's one thing you take out of this, and I'd love to ask Mandy what yours is, if it's different to mine, but it's kind of a multifaceted. Like, initially, find the thing that you want to commit to for a period of time. That's why we do a 4-month process, because everyone can do something for 4 weeks, but 4 months is enough time to be like, cool, I'm going to stick to this for a sequence of time. And I can tell you, not everyone does that. They get to 2 months and then they get shiny red object syndrome and they go to do another thing. Just as they were getting results. And then once they get to that point that they know they're onto a good thing, now we trust intuition to find the next thing, right? Rather than kind of going noisy again. What's your one thing, or obviously my one thing became two things, but what do you reckon?
My one thing is many things. I do think it is stop. We've talked about this before too. Stop hopping from one thing to the next.
Yep.
Find the one thing, do that for long enough, and then ask yourself the question of, is it working? Right? Because I think this is the thing, is that people will do something and they're like, should I do this or should I do that or should I do this? Is this good or is this bad? Well, what are you doing? Is it working for you? Is it not? If it's not, then we can go to that change thing of change something up and then give that some time. And I think people just forget that actually when we change an input of whatever we're doing to our body, there is a lag time for our body to change its outputs, right? We don't, as soon as you do some squats, you don't get a massive big booty, right? It takes some time to build that up. I was going to use another word there.
That was a great example, man. That's exactly what I'm looking for. But there's a point here as well that I'd bring up, which is a plateau is defined as staying stuck for 4 weeks. A plateau is not defined by it's Tuesday, I've had 3 healthy meals, why have I not dropped the weight yet, right?
Yeah.
And I think just being able to look at that when you say give it time, it's not 24 hours, it's typically at least 4 weeks, right? So when we're trying to make changes for clients, sometimes 2 weeks, but for the most part, certainly in the first 6 months of any drastic change, do this thing, do it for 4 weeks, reassess, right? Because if you've done it for 32 hours, it can't really tell us anything, right? And I think that's probably the biggest point, is just give yourself that time to reduce noise. Hence why I think even a theme of this year so far has been unplug the headphones, now listen, go for the rest of your walk without noise, right? Just take that time to absorb what we've talked about and see how that's actually going to apply to your life. Because if it doesn't change anything, you didn't learn anything, and that was a waste of time. You could have listened to Jimmy Carr on some form of funny thing that was more entertaining, right? If you want something to change, information gathering is just a form of entertainment until it actually changes behavior. So that's where I'm going to finish. Is there anything else to finish on or to add before I wrap up?
No, I think that's good.
There's so many things I want to say, but I think this is enough. Team, I hope you've enjoyed this. We bring this in every Monday after a big long weekend of ideas percolating, but we want to bring the biggest things or the most important things to front of mind for you, because when we want to put more information out on the internet, we don't want to make it more noisy and more confusing. That's what's already out there. And if you listen to this, you're in a place where you want things to last long term. You know it's not a shiny red button. We'll make it easier, but we won't say it, we can do it for you. So hope you have an amazing week. Hope this has been helpful in some form. And now it's time to unplug and give yourself at least a few minutes to reduce noise before you move into whatever's next. So enjoy the week. See you next time.